having a diverse business brings you a good business, brings good profit. You will do better. Diversity of thought, diversity of voice, social mobility, all what we're speaking about. And I feel a little bit like, if you don't know, get to know. I do feel like that with organizations as well. There is beauty in difference, and you will see your people thrive, and they will perform the best they ever have. If they haven't got to put on a cloak and a mask and come in and conform, you want that diversity of voice. If you're scared of it, we can support you to understand why. But, this is about moving forwards. Like we said, people are voting with their feet. Gen Z are looking you up, so people are looking you up. You can say what you like. You can say what you like on your social media. People are looking behind that. They want to see what's really going on. They want to know how people really feel. So I think, yes, absolutely. We talk about the two sides of the coin, supporting and helping the majority to understand how to lead inclusively, how to embrace and not fear difference, but also understanding what is acceptable and what isn't, because I think that's important as well. And sometimes if we're moving away from language, sometimes we could be leaning into a space where we're not being really clear what's acceptable and what isn't, what is discrimination and what isn't. And I think being able to guide people on that together with developing leadership capability is important, because it's about confidence, isn't it? There's a fear, we know that, but once you understand that and you've been educated, now it's about stepping forward. And I think we are seeing organisations who have invested in good training and development. That's good. So step one, great. The next step now is supporting you to really put things into action. And actually you're saying this is what you want, this is how it can happen, and this is how you can build the capability through the safety of coaching and development, for, like you said, Christina, the majority, all of the workforce as well. So how do we hit that sweet spot is almost what we're saying here, isn't it? It's that sweet spot of development for all, but also being able to support and develop leaders individually. So you are understanding those equity barriers, and you're also pulling out and challenging those inherent barriers and behaviours that need to change. When you were talking about hierarchy, tradition, the way it's done round here, I think it's important to support organisations in that way. Well, I describe it as supportive challenge.
I also think that part of the reason why it has not been successful to date, because absolutely there's the stats, we've got the McKinsey stats about but if you've got 30% of the workforce that's diverse, you will do better from a revenues perspective, it will encourage retention, etc. But it is hard. If you've ever worked in a truly diverse team, it is hard. And that's the bit that most organizations aren't saying, or a lot of the coaching programs and consultancies that are saying, great, this is what it should look like, this is how we should all feel, as though it's a utopia. Actually, if you've got a truly diverse team, it's really difficult. But the beauty of it is that there's no such thing as a group think, so that's why you innovate, that's why you create. But actually having a set of 8, 9, 10 completely different people that are forced to work together on a team and haven't necessarily chosen to do so, there's a real difficulty that I think that should be acknowledged and spoken more about. And that's where we start to be like, okay, it is going to be a challenge, but as a culture, how do we offset that? How do we make this work for us?
I think there's such a missing piece where organisations do not spend enough time on building the team. So we have leadership development programs. You hit a certain milestone within your career. You're getting coaching. You're learning about your personality type. You're reflecting on yourself. You learn about your self-awareness. That's leadership stuff. But then that's almost at the end of your journey. It's the beginning for you because you're now a leader. But there's so much that comes before that. And you might every now and again have a team away day to talk about business goals. But whoever teaches you how to be an employee at this company teaches you how to be a part of a team. It's stuff you pick up through your career, and if there's an opportunity to learn that. So 10 people, totally different backgrounds, different parts of the country, went to different types of schools, nothing in common or very little in common with each other. You're going to get pockets of toxicity. You're going to get pockets of positivity. You're going to get pockets of everything, because no one has actually sat down and said, let's take time outside of the work we do to learn how to make this work. And then, if that's the beginning of your journey at the organisation, then work in your leadership programs, your management programs, your line management programs. how to be an employee program. Like, let's not leave all the good stuff to when you're, you know, in your 40s and now a leader, or in your 20s and a leader because you know, you've done a fast route. Take it right back, peel it back, because then I think you're doing the job of what society could or should do, teaching you how to be together.
Such an important point what you're making there, Christina, because that's what we want to get at, isn't it? The how. So thinking about building dynamic, diverse teams. Throughout my career in the NHS, I've always worked in service improvement, transformation, change. So it's something I did time and time again. And it's so true. Your best maverick, your best innovator will stretch your leadership capability to the limit. And I think when I speak with leaders, I love working with leaders in challenging, complex environments, when it's fast growing, when it's challenging, when it's busy. 20 years in the NHS was that and then some, especially the last part of my career. But I think being honest about that, you know, it will stretch you, but they will deliver the best work. You know, you will crack that failing programs that I inherited that we had to build a team around, and seeing success because embracing the difference. You know, sometimes we dress things up, simply asking people, you know, what do you want? What do you think? How can I help? Those are real basic questions that help you to understand your team, where your people are at and how they're feeling. Where are your people at the moment? How are they feeling? What does this mean for them? Those basic questions can unlock so much in understanding the components of how you start to bring people together. What is that common thread? So is that common thread the change you're trying to make? What brings people together? But the fear of difference, you know, because I think what also makes it hard is the fear of difference. Yeah. You know, I haven't worked with someone like this before. I haven't experienced this before. We usually run our projects like this. You're telling us to do that.
Or I have worked with someone like this before, and I think you're biased. I think you're going to be just like the other person that worked with
went
before.
Wrong. That went wrong. It was a disaster.
It's a disaster. I know your type kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like that too. That can be such a hindrance.
One of the questions I've got for you, Tacita, is about how do we create safety? So when we are speaking about this, so we're pushing it now, isn't it, and saying actually, we'd like you to think differently. Our top teams, our senior leadership teams, we'd like you to think differently about this and come at it from both angles. But what happens when the culture isn't quite there yet? So leaders know where they want to get to, but it's not quite there yet. How do you create that safety to say, I am going to try again, even though I had someone like that and it was terrible?
You need transparency and trust. It's a difficult ask of anyone to say, could you just be really, really open about why we're doing this, or really, really open about why you want me to do this, or open about what you think I'm good at or not. And then if I make myself vulnerable in that transparency, can I trust that you have the right agenda for me at your core? And if your manager is great, then great. But a lot of managers aren't, and therefore there will be no transparency because there's an agenda for them. There'll be no trust because they don't want to trust you. They can't trust themselves. They can't trust the people. So I think transparency and trust are things that, you know, they're the eggs you need to crack to bake the cake. Not a lot of people want to do that. It's a really, really, really tough space, especially when you're working with people who are in fear of exposure themselves. A lot of people are winging it. A lot of people are just trying. A lot of people are in the position of leading people because that's the only way they could succeed, or that's the only way they could get more money to get to the position or to fund their lifestyle. Or a lot of the time, if you gave the people the option between managing people or just managing process with exactly the same salary, they'd pick managing process. If that's the case, and all people that did pick managing process over managing people, that are managing people, please take the people away, because they are a detriment. Those leaders are not in it for the right reason. So how do you create that? Ask the question. Create avenues in which people who don't want to lead others can also succeed, and those that want to are able to lead people, because that's 9 times out of 10 the issue. Then if you've got true leaders who have empathy, who care, who understand, who want to get to know you, who want to be able to pick out those gems. We've all had the leaders, mentors, coaches in our lives that have seen something in us. You know, if you think about your best boss, which your best boss and why were they your best boss? Well, if you just do a pinch of what they did, you'll be the best boss for somebody else. If you can bring that out in those people, my goodness, you can unlock so much within your organisation. But, you know, tradition, hierarchy, squares on a piece of paper, you know, this box reports to that box, reports to that box, and it just becomes bureaucratically unsafe, because I can't talk to the person who's 2 boxes above me, who I do trust and sees me. I've got to talk to that box above me and that box. It's ridiculous. So remove those 2 boxes and give them something else to do so that I can connect with the person that's going to make me feel safe in this environment, because that's all you want. If you can go to work and be yourself in whatever that means for you, bring your whole self to work is lovely if you can, but it's a luxury. It's definitely a luxury.
In the current state.
Definitely, it's a luxury. So I think that, if you can create environments like that, that's where you'll get to your original point. It's difficult. I won't say businesses aren't ready. Some of them are ready, but it's hard. It's hard work.
It's really hard work. And I think some of the best organisations we work with are the ones that say, we're not where we need to be, but we're on the journey. And we want you to be on the journey with us. So they're doing the pulse surveys, they're doing the listening, they're doing the check-ins, and they're really making their employee resource groups feel part of the fabric of the business. So it's not, it's not a forum for tea and sympathy where they can all cry about what they don't have. It's we're thinking about relocating to new office locations. Let's bring in the disability network. What do we need to think about as a business in order for this to be sustainable? Really pulling them into things that are going to drive the business forward from a strategic, logistic, operational perspective. So all of those voices are valued, welcomed, respected and heard, instead of just it being a group that everybody can kind of feel a part of, and preaching to the choir. They've got to elevate them from that place. And I think that where we see real progress is where the exec leadership teams share their story. So they do a lot of the role modeling around why inclusion is important to them, not the business, not the organization, but this is important to me because. So their why and hearing their purpose, because it shifts them into being people. Because we talk C-suite, we talk exco, we talk leadership team. They are people. It's like in the same way that we say, that organization's got a terrible culture. It's not the organization, guys. It's the people. Who are the people? It's the managers, to see just talking about, that don't want to be managing people. They would love to be an individual contributor, but they can't because they're the only person who knows how to run that function. They've been over promoted in that role. We see this all the time. All the time. I thought it was brilliant, actually, your point earlier around the employee training, the employee program. Because when I was coming, we used to have an employee program, but they kind of disappeared. And so by the time that we are having coaching later on down the track, it's too late. So we have a culture coach in our business. And every Thursday, once a month, we go away as a whole team. We spend time together as an entire team. So the EAs, the marketing team, my management team, because it's so important. Because we're working in this hybrid remote environment, which won't go away, which is upsetting to a lot of organizations. It's not going to go away. Quite rightfully, it shouldn't do. It means that if you're not coming together, you're creating your own microculture at home. And that then dictates what your business is. So I'm really intentional around what I want our culture to be, how we come together. So it's important that we take the time. So half a day, yes, we could be doing so much more as a business, but I see long term we will be way more productive by investing in each other.
Thank you, Christina, for sharing that example, because again, like we said, we're talking about these things almost to a point in theory, but in practice, how do you do it? And I think underpinning your team. So when you said we have dynamic, diverse teams, it's hard to manage. You're working in a fast-paced, fast-moving business. That is what you work in recruitment. So sharing your example of how you use that team development space and with your culture coach to underpin what is it we're doing. And it really connects that work of, you mentioned about coaching tends to in some organizations come up later in the journey. I think there's something here, and what you were saying, Tacita, about we've got leaders, people who are leading big teams, difficult environments, and it's because their technical ability, that process that they're great at, is why they've risen up. But they haven't had the leadership development and support along the way, because we're not seeing that's offered usually to emerging leaders, is it? It's crucial. It's absolutely crucial that it is, because it's win-win. You get to develop that person and build their confidence and capability, isn't it, on feeling comfortable to lead people, being aware of some of the challenging situations they'll face, how to maneuver those. One of the most important things you said there was about being confident to lead as who you are. Bring your authentic self to work. It's a term that we hear so much, but how do you do that? I think as organizations, if you really want your teams, your colleagues, your leaders to do that, being able to support them with a safe space through coaching to understand identify their leadership style and feel confident to step into spaces with it, especially if you're the only lonely, especially if you're new to it, especially if you're calling out, actually, I've been in this role for 10 years, but I haven't really done any work on my leadership development. I think it's such an enabler, but being able to connect it to what you were describing, Christina, to when you are also working as a team, the dynamic of individual and group coaching and support, I think is so powerful when you're trying to drive a change in culture, when you're trying to support people to build trust and transparency. Having space where you can be open as a team and learn and reflect underpins that so much. Yes, I'm a coach and I'm a great believer in it, but actually it's not just saying it's about the coaching tool, it's about thinking how you can offer that dynamic for the individual, for the team as well. And then almost you become a coaching culture in the business. So what you were touching on, Tacita, in your last episode about how culture underpins everything. But I'll get off my soapbox now because there's a question I want to ask you, Christine. I want to throw a kind of spanner into the works here. We've spoken about unblocking and I use diverse. Maybe I'm going to drop it and say unblock your leadership pipelines, right? Yes. But we spoke about the two sides of the coin, understanding the needs and the equity barriers that are there for your underrepresented leaders.
Absolutely.
Educating, challenging and supporting and driving your majority leaders to start to think differently. What about the scenarios that you work with where you're parachuting senior leaders into businesses when they may be underrepresented? That's what you do. What happens in that scenario when people step into the organization at a senior level already? So they haven't come through what we're saying, like the emerging talent. They haven't experienced if that organization's got a great program. They're parachuted in. What happens in those scenarios?
In terms of how they feel or how they're treated by the organisation?
What support can you give organisations who are in that situation? So, heard your whole conversation this morning about what you're all saying, but I've brought senior leadership in. We've seen that we're not representative at top level. We've recruited in. That's been our priority. Yeah. What happens in that scenario?
One of two things can happen. So one, when we've appointed a senior leader who's typically diverse, they usually have enough leverage around the boardroom because of their track record and their history to already have buy-in from that organisation. And they're typically being bought because of that unique skill set that they have and their reputation in the industry. So the business already know what they're buying. For us, the challenge really, really sits at the levels below that. So C-1, 2, where somebody is trying to get around that boardroom and there are invisible blockers that they don't understand why they're not being promoted. But for the person that's typically bought in, they have a lot of leverage around the boardroom. The other side of that coin is they join an organisation that hasn't fulfilled the commitments and promises to the diverse individual that they thought they would. So right now, we see a lot of the financial services, big four accountancy firms who are like, we need women, we want more women. Come, we're going to give you a really beautiful sign-on bonus. This is what your salary is going to look like. All great. Then it's right. Coming down the track is working in the office now 4 days a week. So we're removing that flexibility. You can have one day at home. And it's like, great, but you wanted me. You wanted me and you knew that I had a family at home. Or it's actually, we need you to be on client site until 7, 8, 9 in the evening. But you've removed me from a job that I was safe in. And now you're unpicking all of the added value that you had said that you wanted me for. So you're doing a huge gender drive, let's say. But the culture which you are now presenting is unsustainable for me because of my responsibilities that I've got at home, because actually I had more freedom in my last place. The money isn't fundamentally at that position why people move. So that's what we often see is the cultures that say, great, we want diversity, but they don't have the structures, the systems to support what that actually means. So whether you're caring for parents, whether you've got children, whether you've got a dog at home, like it really doesn't matter, but there needs to be more thought around the structures that are put in place.
And do you offer that support to organisations that you're working with? So in terms of partnering with them to bring in senior talent?
Absolutely. So we're attraction, retention, development. Mm-hmm. So we help them think through how we bring in incredible talent that's reflective of the community, most organisations see an additional 30% of the market because they work with us. Because what we do bring is the underrepresented, is the ethnic diversity, is those from other social groups. And then we help them think through, what does your culture need to look like to be the destination location for talent? What do we need to think through? What changes do we need to make? So we absolutely do that alongside executive leadership team and help work alongside talent acquisition functions as well. Because a lot of the time, the people who are looking for talent don't reflect community. They're typically of a specific gender, specific demographic, and that in itself is a real blocker. So we work with those organisations to help them think differently about attraction.
I think we're taking people on the journey, isn't it, in what you just summarised there of attraction, retention and development. And I think in summarising, what I would say here is, coaching is a key tool to unblock your leadership pipeline, both in encouraging your leaders and emerging leaders to flourish and be who they are, but also thinking about, like we said, how do you stop that people dropping off the cliff edge? Or if they do parachute in to your boardroom or your C-suite or your senior leadership team and they are underrepresented, the support that you're giving them and continue to give them, so that if they are the only one, how do you operate and navigate and have the confidence to have to leaders who you are? And I want to use the language demand equity of voice, because a lot of the clients I'm working with senior colleagues, black colleagues, females in male dominated environments, young leaders, who they have skill, they have capability, they can do it. It's supporting them to build the confidence to lead and challenge as who they are. Recognizing that it's not imposterism, actually, it's that you're not being offered equity of voice in the space. So you're not getting equity of voice with your peer groups. How do you manage and maneuver and challenge that? If you do want to stay, in that environment, how do you maneuver that? And I think one of the things that I think is really important with coaching is not just coaching the individual, but understanding the system that they're working in too. So really looking for the opportunity and appreciating the opportunities that we're working with businesses who are recognizing that and understanding if you can put the parts of the jigsaw together, what we've been speaking about, the attraction, retention and development, actually you can unblock the pipeline and you can see diverse or underrepresented colleagues flourish, and you will start to see your boardroom, your C-suite, more representative of the people and communities that they serve. So this has been a great conversation. I think it will continue, but for today, thank you very much.
Thank you.